Welcome again to Digging Deep with me, Monika Shafooli. On this channel, we discuss real life stories from real people. This is a judgment-free zone because nobody's perfect. I'll tell you something, my friend. You are not perfect. I'm not perfect. So, why don't we take it from there? Well, today the story is about me and how I was brought up and why am I the way I am. I've come to realize that the life that we're exposed to when we were very, very young, we become that person. So I wanted to dig deep into the roots of my life and tell you what I went through. Perhaps you would understand why I am the way I am. So this story is going to be about my mother, how she brought me up, or she didn't really bring me up, how she was involved in my life and what she exposed me to that led me to become the way I am. The only problem we have here is my mother is not only a mother to me. My mother is a mother to 3 other kids, and me telling what I would call, because I come from a culture where we don't really discuss these things, so me exposing this side of my mother might hurt my siblings, but what they have to understand is this is not their story. This is my story, talking about me and what my mother exposed me to be, or what my mother exposed me to, which led me to become who I am. Because I want people to understand me. Perhaps they're going to find out some mistakes that I've done, the wrong things that I've done in my life, and perhaps they can, how can I put it? They will be able to see themselves through me, because we do not discuss these things. I have never ever discussed these things, not with my siblings, not with my aunts, not with my grandmother, not even with my mother. So this story, my siblings, if you are listening, please forgive me. I am talking about me and what I went through with my mother. So here we go. Alright. So the story today is about me in my life, why I am the way I am, and the story today is about my mother and my mother's abusive relationship. Please, I want you to forgive me. Sometimes my brain might go off because I am in my early 40s right now and I've never ever spoken about this. We've never ever discussed this because I come from a culture where we don't talk about these things. These things just happens and life goes on and we don't talk about these things. So these are my traumas. So sometimes I might, you understand. So my mother was married to a man that was my stepfather, who happened to be my sister and my brother's father. I don't ever remember my mother and my father being in a relationship. But I from what I recall, because my mother is late, so she passed on. From what I remember, from what she told me, she was married to my father. So after divorcing my father, she got married to this man that was the father of my sister and my brother. And actually the first man that I ever remember in my life is not my father, is my stepfather. He was a doctor, and we were refugees in Zambia, and this man, at the time, it was me, my older brother, my little sister. At the time, my younger brother wasn't born yet. So this man, he was very, very abusive. This is the first man that I was ever introduced to. The first, if you call it the love of your life, is the man that is in your life. The father figure in the house was my stepfather. And I remember, the first time I remember a grown man in my life was a man that was very abusive. My mother would be beaten up day in, day out in Lusaka, Zambia. Because I don't know who's watching. When I tell a story, I always assume everyone that's watching is from Namibia. So they understand that I was born in exile, but if there's anyone else that's watching that's not from Namibia, I was born in Zambia. My parents were from Namibia. Namibia, there was war, so we were refugees in Zambia. This man, he beat my mother January to December. My mother will be in hospital from being beaten up. Out of the hospital, as soon as she comes out, she lives a life where she's like a slaughter animal. In my younger life, at this time, from what I'm remembering, I'm 5 years old. And in my 5 years old, in my early age, I see blood. That blood is from my mother. Either her face is cut, her mouth is cut with a knife, her chest is cut. And I remember us moving just from one house to another house. I'm someone that meditates a lot. And when I meditate, I'm able to see those pictures of what I went through when I was a child. I'm able to really dig deep and see pictures of my childhood memory. And from what I remember is we were moving from one house to another house because obviously we were not Zambians, we were Namibians renting. And every time the owners of the house would kick my parents, who was my stepfather and my mother, out of the house because of the abusive relationship that they had. So we would stay in the house for about 3 months, and the next time we are picking up, moving to another house, and every time either the neighbors are calling the police or the owner just doesn't want us there. And as much as the owners are calling the police, I remember very well that each time the police would come around, my mother would say, "No, everything is fine, everything is fine." So the police would wonder, okay, she is fine, she's doing well. So they'll come around, they'll look. If you call the police and say the woman is being beaten, and the police come around and the woman that you said she's being beaten, she says everything is fine, the police would leave. As long as no one is dead, she would clean up the blood and everything else, and they walk in. My stepfather would be sitting in his chair, Mr. Doctor, and I remember very well, he always wore a white shirt. I don't know why I remember a white shirt with a red and a blue pen. I don't know if that was a sign for him to feel like he's a doctor. So the police would walk in, the Zambian police would walk in the house, and my mother would just say, "No, we are fine, we are fine." She will clean up herself and we are fine. So the police would walk away. 2 days, we have to move out to go to another house. This went on for a very, very long time. And it came to a point where I remember very well my mother being pregnant with my little brother. And she went to the hospital. She went to give birth. And we were young. One thing I did not mention, as much as this man was so abusive to my mother, he was abusive to my mother and to my little sister, who was his biological child. He was never ever abusive to me and my brother. We are from a different father. This story will come in later. My father, at this point, why was he not in our life? When I start counting the years now, because none of my parents are around for me to ask this question, for them to tell me what really went on, I'm starting to realize my parents were very, very young. So they might have been in their early 20s, I think 20, 21. So my mother must be 21, and then my stepfather must be a little bit older, don't know the age. They were very, very young parents. My father was still at university. So when my mother and my father were married, they were young students. So my father went off to university to study. So when she went off, my mother was left alone with me and my older brother. And obviously you leave a woman alone with kids, at some point you are gone for too long in a different, probably city, country or something. I don't know. That's what I'm picking up. And at that point, my father is not in the picture. My mother then meets this man. That is the doctor who becomes my stepfather. So anyway, I just wanted to take you back in that moment, but I'm gonna fast forward. So, I don't know if you remember where I was. My mother is now pregnant. She's going to give birth. I don't know if that sounds weird, but it can't sound any better. She has to go deliver a child. And she goes off to the hospital and she gives birth to my younger brother. She comes back, I think, after a week or 2 weeks of being in the hospital. I'm very young, I'm 5 years old. I meditate and I'm remembering these things. Because these are memories that I've blocked out of my life. But I see a therapist to help me out because I've got so much trauma that has happened into my life. And I have to go there. So these memories are coming back into my life. That's why I'm telling you about these things. She comes back home, she's got this newborn child, and from what I'm remembering, it's probably just after 3 days of her coming back. New little baby, little baby Pink, our little brother. She comes back. The second day we are all happy we have a little brother. The third day, this man, I don't know what happened, this man was very insecure. This was the biggest abusive, or the biggest beating that I've witnessed in my life. This man beat my mother. I don't know whether he took a knife or something. He cut my mother from here, from her mouth from here to there. She's just a young woman. She's married to a doctor. She's a housewife. I don't know if I mentioned that she's a housewife. She's got a newborn baby. I'm a mother of 2 kids, so I understand what your body goes through when you've just given birth. And my mother is now, from what I thought she's dead. She's bleeding. The whole apartment where we're living, there's blood. There's a newborn baby that no one can breastfeed. This stepfather of ours, he does this thing and then he sits away there's a newborn baby. The ambulance comes, take my mother away. My mother is taken away. And when she was taken away, before she was beaten up by this man, she was perfectly fine. Now she's away. There's a newborn baby. This man can't go to work. He's a doctor. He cannot go to work. My little brother is a newborn baby. And our neighbors, because she had friends around the neighborhood, our neighbors are telling us, they're not telling us, but I can hear, they're saying she's got cerebral malaria. Something. It's like a mental illness. It's like this malaria is not really from a mosquito biting you. It's like a mental illness. My mother is going mad. My mother is in a hospital and she is going mad. Me being a mother that has gone through postnatal depression, I can understand what it means. This is probably 35 years ago. So what they call cerebral malaria, to what I'm suspecting today, is a woman that's physically and emotionally abused, and she has postnatal depression. So that's a mental illness that she's going through. And wherever my father was, I don't know who told him what's going on. This was the ticking moment where my father realized, gotta go get my kids. So we are here now. Okay, so at this point, the abuse has gotten so bad that wherever my father was, he realized he's gotta get his 2 kids out of that, whatever that is, where my mother was. From what I'm thinking about now, when it's not now, it's not like this moment, when I've thought about whatever went on in my childhood, I think my stepfather was very afraid of my father. That's why he never touched me and my brother. He never wanted my father anybody to tell him that your kids are being abused or anything. The only person that he was abusing was my mother. He never touched us. But at this point, listen, these are Namibians that are living in Zambia in exile. It's a very small world. What goes around comes around. The story is going around. He decides, at that point also, not only does he decide, at this point he's finished, he's done with his university. Like I said from the beginning, I don't know if you remember, I don't remember my mother and my father being together. For the first time, I'm meeting my father. You see a smile on my face. I'm blinking as well. Oh, I'm going back at that moment, and it was the most beautiful moment. For the first time I'm meeting my father, I'm like 4 or 5 years old. My father turns up, to me, he's a gorgeous man. He looks like me. He really does look like me. My mother was very beautiful to me, was a very beautiful light-skinned woman. And she looked nothing like me. She looks more like my older brother. For the first time I'm seeing where I come from. This man turns up, he's young. From what I'm thinking about now, it's probably like, at that time he's about maybe 28, 20, he's a very young man. So he's a young man. And he turns up, he looks like me. And my father turns up, he picks me and my brother up. And we don't know where we are going. I'm just thinking, hooray! I'm out of this shit, whatever that shit was. Whew. My father picks us up, and when he picks us up, I remember this man, he switches from bed to when my father comes around, he's like, hello Shafooli, how are you? He's like the best friend to Shafooli. And by the way, I think who's Shafooli, my name is Monika Shafooli, in case you didn't know. Welcome, come closer. And hello Shafooli, and your kids are the most beautiful kids. And Shafooli was my father at that time, saying thank you very much for being in my kids' life. But I know my father he's heard what's going on, and he picks us up. And at that moment I didn't realize, probably this would be the last time I'll see my mother for a very long time. And we are off. My mother was living in the city. If you come from Namibia, I want to translate that and give it to you in a Namibian way. My mother was living in Windhoek. Windhoek, Lusaka. My father is just done with his university. He's highly educated at this point. And but he got a job in Oshakati, Maheba. Oshakati, what I'm referring to in this point was, Maheba was a refugee resettlement camp. So this is not the SWAPO camps, what you call Onyango and other things. No, this was a refugee resettlement camp, which was all the refugees in Africa that were in Zambia at that point were in this village. So you had refugees from Congo, you had refugees from Angola. I'm talking about what was there in that moment, because I remember this. We had refugees from Congo, from Uganda, because there was heavily AIDS in Uganda at that time, and from Angola because of whatever was going on in Angola. I was too young to understand. Anyway, but because my father was very educated, when we left Lusaka to go and live with my father in Zambia, whenever I mention my father, look at my mouth, this side, I smile. This man was very special. So we get to Maheba, and we have this house. My father was not married, he was a single man. So I was living with 2 men. This was my older brother and my father. We lived like that for a very, very long time. So I was a daddy's girl. I was treated very well and I was dramatic. I'm a very dramatic woman. So my father allowed me to just be dramatic. And my father always said, I remember my father's voice. If only I could go back to those moments, my daddy. You remind me of my mommy. That's what my father said to me. Oh, Afameme. So he would call me my little mother. And he allowed me to be dramatic and whatever you can expect of. I had many moments where sometimes I thought I was a ballerina, how a ballerina can be in Africa, and in a village. I would wear swimming costumes. My father would allow me to do that. In this village that we lived, because my father was highly educated, like I said, those days computers were like, to be able to deal with a computer, you would be considered like a doctor of computers. So my father was the doctor of computers. 35, 37, 100 years ago, whatever you want to mention. So the first computer, my father knew how to deal with those things. So he was the man in that village. My father. Anyway, so he really allowed me to be myself. I became this woman that I could only connect with men. My brother, my father, and the only kids that I played with were my older brother's friends. So I was a tomboy. I don't ever remember wanting to play with Barbie dolls or thinking I'm gonna get married and I'm gonna be Cinderella. No, those things were not I wasn't interested in that. I was the girl that would watch, what was that movie? Guys, remember I'm a village girl, I'm an African girl. Zena, the Princess Warrior. I would be one of those people when you watch ninja movies and you see a girl climbing the tree and she get on the top. That was my fantasy. I fantasized to become the Princess Warrior. I grew up to become, and my father encouraged me to be that. So I was encouraged by my father to be a very strong woman. A woman that would go on and conquer. Perhaps a woman that would become the female king. I never got to be that. Perhaps I could be. Who says never shall be? For me, everything is possible. Until then. Okay. I can't really say how long was it did we stay with my father. To start with, I didn't even remember my mother because it was such a sad story. So now I started staying with my father and it's such everything about my father. It was just, every memory with my father was just so happy. But behind my brain, my mother, where is this woman? My mother was never around, sorry. I said my father, my mother. My mother was never around. Every Christmas would pass. I don't remember ever getting a phone call, a card, a picture, or just something to remind me I had a mother. So I think I remember sometimes asking my father very difficult questions. Dad, you know, a kid, you are very vulnerable, and me, I was, as you can see, big mouth. Daddy, Mom, where is she? My dad never lied, just say, I don't know. I don't know where your mother is. So I remember the time that I would think of my mother would be like Christmas, I think Christmas time, or those moments when families are with their own families. My mother was not in the picture. And this went on which felt forever, which felt like a fucking century. Forgive me for saying that word, but it felt that way. And I even remember a moment, it's a very, very sad moment in my life, where my older brother got in a serious car accident where a truck ran over him. A truck ran over his hand. This is not a taxi. This is not a small car. This is a truck, like, you know, the fucking big trucks. My older brother was into cars and engineering and things since he was very, very young. So this truck was delivering something at our neighbors, and my brother, for some reason, because he's been repairing toy cars, he thought, let me go underneath this truck. Forgive me, my brother, I'm talking about your story, but I think it's a very special moment because that moment affected me. He just went underneath this big truck. He went underneath the car, and I didn't know he was underneath the truck. The driver didn't know that he was underneath the truck. He went underneath the truck, and when the driver tried to drive off, this is, you know, those trucks that, if you are in Namibia, those trucks that comes from South Africa to deliver things in Namibia, just drove over his hand. This truck drove over his hand, and there was this accident where now my brother is in a serious car accident, and it's not a car accident, a car banging each other, but it's a car accident where he has to be now taken from this village, which is in Maheba, which I'm saying like it's Oshakati, to be taken back to, not Windhoek, but to something that I would call Oshibarongo, which was, I can't remember the town in Zambia now. This moment really affected me. It affected me for the rest of my life, because my brother's life was changed forever. He was a very good looking boy. My brother is a very good looking boy. But this moment changed his life forever. And this town, which was like Windhoek to Ochibarongo, and my mother is still in this relationship with this abusive man, and she's never called us, she's never visited us, she's never wondered what's happening to us. Now my brother is in a hospital in a town it's the next town after the main capital city, with his arm almost being amputated. My mother did not even visit my brother. I'm left at home with some women that was like our babysitter or something. My brother is off to this hospital. My father is with him for about, it felt forever for me. Probably it was like 3 months. And after 3 months, my father and, sorry, why do I keep saying my mother? My brother and my father come back, and my brother still has his hand attached to his body. It was the best moment ever in my life. And I asked, did mom come? Because I thought mom is in Kitwe. Kitwe. So you have Lusaka and you have Kitwe. These towns are very, very close to each other. Did mom come? Because I thought mom is in Lusaka. And my father and my brother, they are in Kitwe, in the hospital in Kitwe. And did mom come? No. Because I could live through that moment, my mother visiting my brother in Kitwe. I could just save that moment to get close to my mother. She was not there. What I'm thinking about right now is my mother was one of those women that puts a man first, because it does not make any sense. I don't want to judge her, because I say this is a judgment-free zone, because for her to be the way she was, we can only go back into her past, because this is about my story. The way I am, I'm digging deep into my past. For her to be the way she was, something must have happened into her life. I never had a moment to dig through that. But my brother comes back. For me, I became like I was like the little mother of this house. My daddy is back, my brother is back, his hand is together. Although it's together, it's not really straight. I'm not gonna go into that because that's not my story, that's my brother's story. But Okay, so now my father is back, my brother went to the hospital, my mother never visited, and at this moment I've come to realize, you know what? I would say fuck this bitch. Yeah. At this point I said, fuck this bitch. I'm very, very young. And in that moment it felt like fuck this bitch. I now decide to erase this woman. For the first time as probably a 6-year-old, or I don't know how old I was, I said, fuck this woman. I have this thing where I still do it today. When someone becomes irrelevant in my life, I dig a hole for them, I bury them, and I say goodbye. That's what I did. I say goodbye to her in that moment. And we're here now. Okay. So, like I said, I thought to myself, you know, fuck this bitch, fuck this woman, whatever it was. It was, for me, it was no longer, she was no longer anything to me. She was just, yeah, somebody that gave birth to me. My father was my mother, my father, my everything. This man, this gorgeous man to me, this handsome man. There was no woman in his life at that point. We were his life. A man that takes on a mother's role and becomes our everything. After my father came back from the hospital from in Kitwe with my brother had his hands on and everything was fine because I was just worried for my brother to come back with no arm. And everything was fine. This happiness didn't last for a very long time. Probably lasted for, I really don't know the accurate time, but I probably would think probably for a year after my brother and my father came back from the hospital. And I'm not gonna dig deep into my father's life, political life, what happened to him, but I'll give you a little bit because I want that to be a story for another day. After a while, when my father came back from the hospital with my brother, suddenly there was an agent for us to move away from this village. We had to move today, fast, pack up, go. We pack up our things. We leave this village, which I will compare, was Maheba. It's like Shakati. We are now moving fast, and we are moving today. We were just told, pack up, everybody pack up right now. Packing up. We're going to Windhoek. It's not Windhoek, but the equivalent of Windhoek. We are going to Lusaka. We are about to leave Lusaka to go to Canada. So we pack up everything. We move to Lusaka, and this is from what I'm thinking now, that because I told you that I do meditate for me to understand what went on in my life. The timeline that I'm thinking right now must have been a year from my brother's accident, where my mother never turned up because I was really hoping I would see my mother then. So we now enter another refugee camp from Maheba to Lusaka, which is like from, I think you guys understand, from Maheba to Lusaka. We are now waiting for our document to be processed for me, my brother, and my father to go to Canada. And I think we would have been in that camp. That camp for those people, I don't know, the SWAPO member. You know what I'm saying. We don't speak about these things. I'll speak about them just a little bit. We were in Makeni refugee camp, I think. I've never went back to Zambia. I want to. I'm going to. If I don't move on from this life to another anytime soon, I want to go face that chapter and understand what went on. We were in Makeni refugee camp waiting for our documents to come out, and my father was killed. It wasn't he was sick or anything else. My father was a politician. He got killed fast. As much as he was killed, it was a very beautiful moment for us. He had a moment to say goodbye to us. He knew what was going to happen to him. I remember that specific day when my father was killed. He called me and my brother. And my name at home, I'm called Dina. Dina fits with my personality. Dina! Dina! Came from the garden. I remember 2 very strong, aggressive men came in our camp. They were asking around where Callistus Shafooli lives. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Callistus Shafooli's daughter. And I'm Gendina Monika Shafooli. Here I stand, speaking to you people. You kill Shafooli, you live a little bit, you leave Diamond Monika Shafooli. She's here to represent. He called me and my brother. And he says, Dina, I always used to say, I never used to say, Dad. Moshiwam, when your father calls you, you say, Dad, like Daddy. Because I was very embarrassed because my Zambian friend will laugh at me when I say, Dad. So whenever my father says, Dina, I will be out playing with my friends. I just run. And I'll come in front of him and I'll say, Dad. And he called, Do also did the same thing. He ran in front of him and said, Dad. Because we were embarrassed to say, Daddy, in our language, Dad. We come in front of him and he said, what's the word in Oshiwambo? I just want to hug you. Shashinonena. Happening. I don't know what's gonna happen to me today. I just want to say, I just want us to hug. Yeah, we were my father was very loving and everything else. But one thing that we never ever did, we never hugged. It's just something that we don't do in our culture. It's too close. We don't do that kind of stuff. We don't do shit like that. We don't hug. Maybe we just touch you and say, he will say, Dina. But for the first time, my father grabbed me and my brother, and he just hugged us. I was just thinking, okay, this is beautiful. All right. Fine, whatever. I was very dramatic. And he said, okay, you can go and play. I said, fine. We went off. Listen, I love my father so much that I'm now trying to go off on my father's story. I'm leaving that story for another day. But as much as I can leave it for another day, it leads to how I'll meet my mother again. I hope you understand. So, my father left the camp. That moment we were waiting for our documents to come. My father never came back. My father was killed. And for the first time, as 7-year-old, I guess, 7-year-old, I'll meet my mother again. For my lifetime, every time I meet my mother, it's always a very hard moment. For the first time, I'll meet my mother again. Because obviously, my father is dead. So, she's our mother. How else can she run away? She can't. It's not a car accident. But she didn't turn up to meet my brother's accident. This time she has to come. My father is dead. We're in a refugee camp. I had this imaginary woman in my head. I didn't know how she looked like because I was very young the first time I left her. This woman turns up. She's heavily pregnant. She turns up at my father's funeral. And Obviously, she's my mother. What child doesn't like their mother? She's very beautiful. I think every child thinks their mother is beautiful. She comes around and my father is dead. This is the moment where they are organizing for my... At this point, when you think of Namibia, when in Namibia there was war, it was at the end of the war, so my father's body has to be prepared to go and be buried in Namibia. So my aunt, who's my father's brother, comes to Namibia. She came to pick me and my brother up. So at this moment, my mother is now, for the first time I'm seeing her, I don't know how long was that ago. She's no longer married to this abusive stepfather that I knew in my life. She is married to a man from Uganda. She's heavily pregnant from a baby with a Ugandan husband. I guess I should call it, this is my mother's third marriage. You have to understand that what I'm going to become in my life has to do with all these things that I've gone through in my life. I'm now being introduced to this woman that's my mother, very beautiful woman, very young. I think at that time she's probably 35. She's with a Ugandan man. And she comes to this funeral. After 2 days, me and my brother, we are going back to Namibia from Zambia with my father's dead body. We are taking my father's dead body back to Namibia. So this is the last time we are seeing it. That time it was 1987. 1987. Namibia wasn't independent then. So 87, 88, 89, 90. Namibia is going to go independent in 4 years' time. So I meet this woman, very beautiful. To me, it's your mother will always be beautiful. Whew. And she's crying like a whale out of, if you take a fucking fish out of the sea. Oh, sometimes I just have to, I'm dramatic like that. If you take a fish out of the sea, you won't see water, but she's fucking crying. What the fuck are you crying about? Is she crying because she's now fucking left with 2 kids, which is me and my brother, my other sister, and my other brother from the abusive husband that I was introduced to? Or are you crying because you are pregnant with this motherfucker from Uganda? I don't know what she's crying about, now that I think about it. So we go off to Namibia. Remember, I only met her the first time when I was very, very young. I'm now meeting her at my father's funeral. I'm being shipped off. Instead of going to Canada with my father is now killed. I'm now going back to Namibia with my father's dead body. I say goodbye to my mother. I'll take that chapter on next.